more people to come in. Good evening. Just waiting for more people to come in. Waiting for more people. So make sure you share the live. It's going to be a good interview today. Make sure you share the live. We'll give it one more minute. So, hello, good evening. Happy Women's Day, Monday, May 8th. Hopefully you guys had a great Monday. So I see a few new people on here. For those that don't know, my name is Danielle George. I am the host of All Things Pan. We are sponsored by, I have big hair today, so we're sponsored by Pantastics 868. So make sure you check them out on Instagram. They have everything from tenor sticks all the way to bass sticks. When you check them out, tell them I sent you. So, for those that are, again, new, on this page we talk to panists, arrangers, tuners, pan enthusiasts, promoters, historians. Like tonight, I'm so excited to have a researcher, a journalist, a filmmaker, history and culture in Trinidad and Tobago, Dr. Kim Johnson. Just gonna wait for him to accept. Hello, Dr. Kim Johnson.
Hey, let me put on my earphones.
No worries.
Okay, you're hearing me, right?
Yes. How are you doing tonight?
I'm fine, thank you.
That's good. Keeping busy or just kind of relaxing today?
No. I actually just cut short a Zoom meeting to come on this, so I just go from one to the
other. Busy man then. So, for those that don't know, I've actually interviewed you. Carrie West actually brought us together in August of last year, and that was a fun interview. So I thought we'd carry it on today, if that's okay with you. So just to let you know, near the end of the interview, we'll get the viewers to ask you some hard-hitting questions. So be prepared.
I'll try my best.
Okay.
Yeah, sure.
All right. So since we last spoke, what have you been up to? How have you been dealing throughout this COVID pandemic?
Well, COVID actually, it I sympathize with people who suffered because of COVID. You know, people lost their jobs and so on. So it was really hard for a lot of people. But personally, it wasn't bad. I mean, the place Trinidad was quiet, and sometimes Trinidad is really a bit too noisy for me. You know, the
Okay.
streets were quiet. My partner and I would go for long walks at night. That was great. And
Yeah.
what I've mainly been doing, I've been rewriting and re-editing my last book on Pan, the illustrated story of Pan. And
Okay.
COVID gave me a lot of time, which is just as well because it took a lot longer than I had planned.
Mm-mm.
So um, it wasn't just rewriting, it was redesigning. I mean, it slowed down things a bit because we had to, first of all, it meant that it was difficult for me to go and interview people, and it slowed down things because it was printed in China where things slowed down and so on. But
Right.
generally, I had more time to work on it.
Yeah.
And
So,
that's it. That's my main project that I've been working on for the past, most of the past year, certainly the
yeah.
8 months of the past year.
Okay. So we're gonna see a new book soon then.
Yeah.
Awesome. So I've been doing some research and there's countless of of things under your belt. I can't like I almost had a full page of stuff. But I'm not gonna name them all. We'll
I hope
also be
so.
here forever. But you've done the history of mangrove and renegades. You've done Repercussions, Our African Odyssey, my favorite movie, Pan, Our Music Odyssey. I mean, that's my favorite movie to this day. You've done Tin Pan to Taspo. You like you mentioned before, the illustrated story of Pan, the second edition. I also know you have a first edition. Why did you decide to write history about Pan in the culture of Trinidad?
I stumbled onto it. It
Okay.
was I was a journalist. I was a journalist for about just under 15 years, and very
Hmm.
early on, I mean, I was relatively privileged as a journalist. I never became like a daily reporter. I went straight to a feature writer on the Sunday Express.
Right.
And very early on, perhaps a year or two after I joined the Sunday Express, um, my my editor, Leonard Grant, he asked me to write something about Bad Johns.
Okay.
And at the time, Steve Stumfley, is a good friend of mine, he wrote a very important book on the steel band movement.
Hmm.
I visited him and I said, you know, I have to write something about Bad Johns. Where do you think I should go? And he said, we'll go and talk to the old steel bands. So
Right.
I went to very close Tokyo, which is very close to the Express office. And they
Hmm.
brought out some of the old timers and they just gave me stories upon stories. And I wrote the article, and it was very, very enthusiastically received. So I thought, well,
Hmm.
look, that's East Port of Spain. Let me do West Port of Spain for a kind of balance. So I went to
Right.
Invaders because that's the sort of historic rivals of Tokyo.
Yeah.
And I got a whole pile of stories again. I mean, they were gems, but they were
Hmm.
different. And that's when I realized every band has its stories. So I
Right.
began going all over Trinidad interviewing the pioneers. I came up with the phrase the pioneers.
Hmm.
Because what was very surprising that no one had ever interviewed these men before. Literally, no one had interviewed them. In all, including academics, there was one interview with Ellie Barnett,
Hmm.
and one that another journalist did with another pan man. But that was it. So like two or
Huh.
three for the max. And
Right.
so I began to interview them, and I ran a series called Pan Pioneers. It it ran for quite a while. I must have interviewed about 600 or 700 of these men and women.
Oh wow.
And I suppose I arrived at a understanding. I used these interviews for my PhD thesis. I arrived
Hmm.
at an understanding that at the time it was quite new. People would take it for granted now, but somehow Steelban had fallen to sociology. People who did sociology wrote about Pan, and they wrote
Hmm.
about a sort of a monolithic thing called the steel band movement
Right.
without going into the individual bands. And the example I gave when I did my PhD thesis was that
Mm-hmm.
if you were to write about jazz, you'd have to be able to distinguish between, say, Louis Armstrong and Duke Ellington. And if you
Right.
just spoke about an abstract thing called jazz, you wouldn't get to the heart of it. You
Mm-hmm.
needed to go to the individuals. If you were writing about, I don't know, rock and roll, you have to tell the difference between, the Beatles and Chuck Berry.
Right.
And similarly, in Trinidad, every band had a different personality, had a different history, made different contributions, and as well as important panmen, they were all different. And that's what that was my, in a sense, my great academic intellectual discovery. And I followed it up.
Mm-hmm.
And I sort of became branded as a sort of kind of pan historian.
So it
So
just
I
stuck.
did. It sort of stuck. Someone came and said, well, look, we want to do a book on renegades. We collect photographs.
Yeah.
Would you write the text? So I said, well, sure. I had written about some of the renegades pioneers, and I did that.
Mm-hmm.
And then someone actually, MEP, that's the people who publish Caribbean Beat, the in-flight magazine. They
Yeah.
approached me to do a book, sort of illustrated book on Mars. And I thought, oh my goodness, Mars goes back to the early 19th century before there were photographs. So it'd be real problems.
Right.
But
Right.
I knew a lot of these pan pioneers, so I persuaded them to let me do one on pan instead.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, okay, that's fine. I mean, eventually they dropped out, but I began collecting photographs. I
Mm-hmm.
thought I'd get, if I was lucky, 1 or 200 because I hadn't seen many.
Right.
And I began writing emails and talking to everybody a certain age on the street. I'd ask them, and I'd ask them to ask their uncle and so on. And
Mm-hmm.
I wrote the U.S. Army, for instance. I thought so many American soldiers were in Trinidad at the time. And I
Right.
got 3 carousels of slides from them.
Wow.
And eventually I collected about 5,000 photographs. And in collecting the photographs, when someone gave me a photograph, I had a portable scanner. I'd be walking all over, all up in the hills of Laventille with my laptop and a portable scanner to scan things,
Yeah.
photographs that were framed on the walls and so on.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd ask them, who's this in this photograph? What's going on? And I'd get more stories.
Mm-hmm.
So um, that's how that book came about. And
Okay.
then I was asked, because of the photographs, to do an exhibition at the National Museum
Oh wow.
with the photographs. So I did
Yeah.
that, and I made the photographs very, very large. In other words, some of them were large as like billboards, covering
Hmm.
an entire wall. And
Right.
that meant, the larger they are, the fewer you can use. So I
Mm-hmm.
thought, there were lots of gaps. So
Right.
maybe what I should do is make a short film that would fill in the gaps. So I made a 10-minute film that would kind of fill in the gaps that the photographs left out. And also
Mm-hmm.
that would add sound because Pan is about music.
Yeah.
And people like that short film. Is called The Audacity of the Creole Imagination. And a friend of mine, he approached me and said, let's make a feature-length movie. So that's how that became, and that's how I got into movies. It was so it
You're
was
just
just
falling
one
into
thing
things.
led to another. One thing just led to another. It was never part of a master plan.
Right. That's funny. Wendy just has a comment. Still using my book up till Friday night. Past love the book. That's crazy. So, I'm gonna ask you a personal question. From all the history and all the people you've talked to throughout the years, do you think Pan has progressed, or do you think it's kind of stagnant where it is right now in Trinidad? Because for me in Canada, I can't really see it.
um,
So,
it's kind of stagnated in some ways. Some ways
hmm
it's progressed. I think the best bands and the best arrangers and the best arrangements are
hmm
really glorious pieces of music. I say they're equal to any grand symphonies anywhere,
right.
at any time period. So in
hmm
that sense, it has progressed. Musically, our arrangers at their best, have
Mm-hmm.
developed and creating really, really beautiful, epic works of art. On
Mm-hmm.
the other hand, the love of pan has diminished significantly,
Mm.
and so there are fewer and fewer people. When you go to a panyard, the people there are, older, which
Mm-hmm.
means, that's a dying demographic.
Right, yeah.
Um, and pan in this heyday was a thing for young people, from adult teenagers up to 20s.
Mm-hmm.
What has happened in Trinidad? You still have mainly young people playing, but they
Right.
don't play it with the same love and loyalty as before. They
Mm.
play it because they did it in school and they get paid to play for Panorama.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them, they will play for bands for Panorama, but they won't play for their own school because they won't get paid by playing for school.
Right.
Um, and that more people celebrate Pan in they talk about it, the national instrument and so on.
Right.
But it's going, and I don't want it to go here. I mean, it's not too late to pull back, but it's going the way that jazz went, where everybody will talk about jazz, and yeah, jazz is a great art form, but you know, um, you could get the top 10 jazz players and they couldn't touch, any kind of two-bit pop artist
Right.
for all their musicianship. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to see that happen to Pan. So
Right.
um, that's the bad news. The good
Mm-hmm.
news is, unlike jazz, I think Pan has different and far richer possibilities, and I spoke about that in some of that in the TEDx talk I gave.
Right.
That I think Pan really is, because of its beauty as a teaching instrument,
Mm-hmm.
and as a way of encouraging people to make music. You see, Pan didn't spread, unlike every other form of African American music, music of the black diaspora, which is popular music, yeah?
Yeah. Yeah.
Whether you like dancehall or reggae or calypso or soul or hip hop or
Mm-hmm.
R&B or salsa, whatever. Pan
Right.
is the only one that didn't spread by people buying records or CDs or downloads, spread by people starting little steel bands all over the world.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Because Pan encourages you to play Pan, not to consume Pan, not to buy and listen to it in your car or in your headphones, but to
Mm-hmm.
be part of a steel band. So
Right.
in a way, Pan is swimming against the current of commercialization that all other popular music has fallen prey to,
Mm-hmm.
whereby, in a sense, music has been taken away from people. We now pay people to provide us. Perhaps a generation or two ago, everybody, they might sing in church, you might sing when you're doing this, people sing when they were working, all of
Mm-hmm.
that.
Yeah.
And that's taken away. If you ask the average person to, sing a song for me, they would say, I can't sing.
Right.
Whereas singing is a human, it's like speaking. Singing is a thing some do it better than others. I don't do it very well, but everyone
Yeah.
can do it. But somehow we've been shamed into feeling we can't do it. And
Mm-hmm.
Pan swims against that current. And that's why, for example, um, I suppose you have to have the climate to facilitate it, but our panyards are all open. When
Mm-hmm.
bands are practicing, you can go in there from the first night and hear them now learning the tune, and you hang out there, and it shows. And this is what some of the ethnomusicologists are now beginning to understand, that making music is not just playing an instrument or singing; it's being part of the whole process. If you're
Mm-hmm.
pushing a pan, if you're lifting it on the truck when it's going, you are part of the band. You're part of making the experience of music.
Right.
Um, and Pan has always encouraged that.
Mm-hmm.
And given the fact that it's also very easy to start playing, you go in a pan yard and say you want to learn, and before you go home, you know a tune.
Right.
And if you compare that with most other instruments, I mean, it could take you 6 months before your fingers stop hurting you when you play a guitar. And, a year and a half before you could bar a chord.
Right.
And most people, if you give them a trumpet, they can't get a sound out of it because you need to learn how to purse your lips. But you know how to pong.
Yeah.
And literally people, there are people who do things like team building in companies and so on. And they would go in a company and get, all the executives or the employees or whatever and distribute some pans. And in 2-3 hours time, they are collectively playing a piece of music when most of them had never played an instrument before. And that is, only pan could do that. You see, so it has a potential to, in the conclusion of my book, which is new, is different from the first edition, I argue that in that sense, pan is the most revolutionary instrument because it gives music back to people.
Right.
As a basic human ability. We are able to speak. We evolve to enjoy music. Why certain beats make us move and feel pleasure, certain differences of tone, why an octave sounds right. I would speculate, and I don't think it's very far-fetched. The reason why an octave sounds right is because men and women naturally speak an octave apart. It's in our DNA to love and to make music. And that has been taken away from us by commercial interests. And pan gives it back. So I think it has potential to, as I said, to be the most revolutionary instrument in the world has ever seen.
Wow. A few comments came through.
Yeah.
Someone had a question. Why aren't we including Pan in the school curriculum from elementary school?
Well, schools,
Yeah.
Especially in elementary school, what we call primary school, I don't think they have dedicated pan teachers, but they do at the secondary schools.
Right.
But it's part of the Ministry of Education, which means it's subject to the conservatism. The steel band movement can be very conservative, and the Ministry of Education is even more so. So, for example, what I've been arguing for years is that when you're teaching music, you don't teach it on a blackboard, you teach it behind an instrument.
Right.
Music is nothing you learn by heart, where you say, well, there are 13 semitones in an octave. That's nonsense. You didn't learn to speak that way. You learn to speak by speaking.
Right.
You should learn to. And what I've also argued, and a lot of people come down very hard on me for this, is that the heart of our music, the music of the Black diaspora, is improvisation and audition. Learn to hear music. Hear something, and oh, that's a 1-4-5 progression. Yeah, that's a fifth there, and you could figure it out for yourself. Teach that and teach improvisation, because the person who learns that can play anything they want. Not what I want or what you want or what the teacher wants, but what they want.
Right.
There have been studies done, and a movement has started in England and is picking up in Canada called Musical Futures. And they found that people who learn music with their friends and learn on music they like, of their choice, and learn to hear music, they become musicians for life. Not necessarily professional, but and you contrast that with the generations of Trinidadians, mainly women who had piano lessons. And this is generations going back to like at least the 20s, who had piano lessons, and 99% of them hated it. And the day the lesson stopped was the last day they touched those keys.
Yeah.
and I wouldn't want to, but that's the road people are trying to shove pan down. We have beautiful traditions of learning with your friends in the pan yard. Each one
Mm-hmm.
teach one. We could build on that.
Mm-hmm.
Don't put the children behind a blackboard. So it has great, great, great potential, and I see it as a low-hanging fruit.
Mm-hmm.
But the the people who have the power, the authority, don't have the imagination. They still think that the best thing you could teach a pan musician is standard notation.
Mm. I see, I see. So we've been talking about the books that you have coming out. Do
Yeah.
you want to tell us when are they going to come out, or what's the plan
Well, well,
behind the
well,
books?
well, well, they are, in a sense, I got the sample copies.
Ooh,
Let
we
me
get
see
to
if
see the
I can,
sample?
yeah. Can you,
Breaking news, breaking news.
can, can, can you see that?
Yes, just over a bit more. Yeah,
Is that okay?
yeah.
So that's what it looks like. Look at
Oh,
that.
wow.
That's where it came from. That's where pan came from.
Right.
Um, and it was kids.
Yeah. Can you go over to your things to your right just a touch? Yeah, like that. That's crazy.
So that's what it is.
Hmm.
I was talking about. Can you read that?
It's backwards, but it's okay.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
okay. Well,
It's okay.
the second chapter it says the operative principle underlying the music Africans brought to the New World is that it must help people to live. This is a functional approach to music. It is made to give people strength when they are weak. It must lift their spirits when they are down. With
Mm,
music, people can celebrate the joys of life, and indeed, it is itself one of life's greatest pleasures. Yet, it must also connect people with their ancestors in the land of the dead and with the gods in the heavens above. Most importantly, music must strengthen the bonds between people, because only with and through others do we become fully human. And that's what Pan
wow.
does.
Wow. That. Wow. So in your book, it's pretty much the history and of every band, or
No, not every band, because literally there were, well, then over the years, there would have been thousands of bands. You have to realize,
right.
especially in its heyday,
Hmm.
every young man, I mean, you have a family, and families were bigger in those days with four boys and two
Right.
neighbors, four boys here and five next door. You form a band.
Right.
Now, that
Hmm.
band may not become famous or anything, but it was just a matter of that. You form a band. So they were
Hmm.
everywhere, every corner could have a band and so on, and hundreds of them. There are
Yeah.
many that no longer exist. So it's not possible, but I choose select ones that made specific contributions.
Hmm.
Um, or there may be a photograph that the photograph tells you something about the movement, even if it's a fairly unknown band.
Right.
Um, so I can't tell every band.
Yeah.
The main bands get at least a cameo.
Right.
You know, you would know the Phase Two All Stars, Exodus, Desperados, Renegades, etc., etc. The old ones that no longer exist, Tripoli, Bar 20, and so on.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
Do you have an idea on when this book is coming out? Because I see a few people
well,
interested in getting it.
well, well, okay. We ship some to the US and some to Trinidad. The ones in Trinidad, I got a message today that it's at the port, so I have to see about customs and so on. The
Okay.
ones landed in in the US, they landed already, and I suppose they must be going by truck or whatever to the
Mhm.
person who's distributing them to people who order. So that will
Okay.
be, that I suppose it should arrive next week or so. And then Miss Malika, my partner's sister, she's
Hmm.
gonna, start sending and posting them out or sending them on FedEx or whatever. So they're
Okay.
pretty much arrived.
Okay. So where can we, if we want to order them, where would we get them?
Well, But we have a website. It's actually on my blog page,
Mm-hmm.
um, which is santimaniteblog.com.
Okay.
On there, there's the home, and there's the illustrated story of Pan second edition, which has order how you can order it and so on.
Awesome. Definitely will
So,
order a few.
oh, that's great. because
Definitely.
it, because it's I mean it's a lavish bouquet
Yeah.
with the photographs, and it's a large hardcover book, so it costs a fortune to print and ship.
Yeah.
But um, but it's just the most comprehensive history, because what I was able to rely on is those hundreds, and it must have crossed 1,000 now, of
Mm-hmm.
interviews that I've had over 20 years.
Right.
Many of, in fact, most of the older people, pioneers have died. No one could interview them. No one has those photographs. And how the book is written is not just like one long text going on and on and on from the beginning to the end, but
Mm-hmm.
there are very long quotes from actual interviews, um, of pioneers. It could be, let me see if I could read one and give you an idea.
Yeah, for sure. I know Malika's on here. Malika, there's a few questions about the book. If you can answer them and post them and also message me about them, and I'll post them as well.
Okay, actually, because I'm on headphones, she isn't hearing you, eh?
Oh,
Okay, for example,
she's in the chat.
oh, okay. Okay, for example, I just opened the page, and this was in 1961 when Dixieland, which was a college boy band, won the
Yes.
festival.
Yes.
And um, this is Ernest Ferrero, who was the captain of the band. He said, Curtis had at the time a small band going, a group of about 7 or 8 guys. This is Dixieland, and I obviously went behind him to try for the festival that was coming up. And he didn't want to go. He felt there's too much work, and we having a good time. We making enough money. I don't think that he wanted to do it as a living as such, but it meant a lot to me, and we should at least try. So I begged and I begged and I begged, and I introduced him to Estudiantina, and eventually he fell for it, and we started off with it. Now let me tell you about Estudiantina. I knew that from a little boy. My father would come home from work in the afternoon, and he had dinner at night. He had nothing else to do, but two things he used to do: sit down and whistle the national anthem of the US, Portugal, France, and England to break the monotony. Now, then he used to whistle Estudiantina. He used to wrap his fingers around the wooden chair he had there, and he would be whistling away in the dark. So this Estudiantina had always been about, a sort of thing in my head, and so on.
Hmm.
And this is a person telling you how we came up with the tune that they won festival with. So it's very personal anecdotes
Wow.
woven in between the sort of my own history.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, some of the anecdotes are really quite funny. Like, for example, the first panorama, it was
Yeah.
organized by a man called Arthur Bentley, an Englishman who married a Trinidadian. He'd been an
Mm-hmm.
impresario in England. So they had asked him to organize this new competition called Panorama. So he called all the captains of the bands and he said, look, this is an important thing. So your audience are your masters. You have to please them no matter what. As a matter of
Mm-hmm.
fact, when you come on stage, you're going to bow. So someone said, well, how will you know when to bow? He said, I'm going to ring something, I'm going to knock something, you'll bow, and I'll knock it again, and you'll straighten up. Okay, good. So
What?
the night, so the night came. Now they still do that, eh?
Yeah.
The night came, and he hit it, and they bow, and somebody come and say, Mr. Bentley, they're jumping over the fence, they're storming. So he rushes off to stop the stormers. And he's
Mm-hmm.
trying to do that, and someone runs behind him and says, Mr. Bentley, come, 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 they still bow.
Oh my goodness. So that's how that started. Wow. We learned something here, everyone.
So,
um,
I have a lot of those kinds of anecdotes.
yeah.
The most famous pan tune, certainly the most played is All Stars Woman on the Bass,
Mm-hmm.
arranged by Smooth.
Yep.
And Smooth didn't want to arrange that at all. He hated the tune. I mean, not as a calypso, but he insisted he wasn't going to arrange it. And all the
Mm-hmm.
young people wanted it. And Smooth decided, look, you had to arrange either a Kitchener or a Sparrow if you want to win.
Right.
But they threatened, and there was big argument. And he said, okay, I'll do it. And boom, the greatest panorama arrangement. So there are all
Wow.
sorts of anecdotes like that
Yeah.
from the horse's mouth because I spoke to them, I spoke to Smooth, I spoke to all of them.
Mm-hmm. Wow. That's crazy. Someone has a question here from Wendy. Dr. Johnson, the last book was great and pictures were mind-blowing. What's the difference about this book?
Um, well, first of all, you have the minor differences. I corrected some typos and some minor errors.
Mm-hmm.
I suspect I might have introduced a few new ones. Um, and the actual quality of the book is better, the binding and so on. But what to me, and there are minor differences, editorial, slight textual differences. This is a bit shorter, this is a bit longer. I've included an
Mm-hmm.
anecdote from this person and not that person. Um, but the big difference for me was the last chapter, the conclusion,
Mm-hmm.
where I look at Pan today and where Pan is going. The chapter which I call Tomorrow's People.
Mm-hmm.
The old book, I didn't have things about Pan in schools, the movement, the young tuners, the young arrangers, and some of what I just discussed, my vision for what is the potential, what is the possible futures for Pan.
Mm-hmm.
Um, to read at the beginning of every chapter, I have a sort of short, not so much a summary, but something that creates the mood of the chapter.
Right.
Um, and the one that I completely rewrote was, as I said, the one for the last chapter, which looked at things like, say, the rise of the rhythm sections, like Laventille
Mm-hmm.
rhythm section. That,
Mm-hmm.
in a sense, that is the engine room of steel bands going independent, partly because Pan has been sort of corralled into a panorama where they play these beautiful and elegant pieces of music.
Mm-hmm.
But when people want to jam, a rhythm section is it.
Yeah.
And, ironically, if you speak to any American jazz musician, they say, when you're improvising, if you run out of ideas, or
Mm-hmm.
you're not inspired, just go back to 12 bar blues, just go back to the blues, touch bass there.
Right.
And that's what it is, it's touching bass with the rhythm section, with the heart of the steel band, as David Rudder sang.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's where it started with iron. It started with, changa chicka, changa chicka, chang.
Yeah.
So there's that, the rise of the single pan or the pan round the neck bands. Um, all of these developments in the context of the recent history of pan. That
Mm-hmm.
last chapter is the main and I think most important difference. Let me summarize. Let me read the short introductory. As I say, it's not a summary. It's just the mood of the chapter. It's
Yeah.
called Tomorrow's People. The future of Pan is not inevitable. It is in our hands, always has been. Before, decisions were instinctual, based on a deep, passionate love, which is always pure. Now, however, Pan is a powerful global movement, and decisions must involve technical, social, educational, and political considerations, which leaves them open to bureaucratic caution and conservatism, or worse, to delusion, greed, and influence peddling. Charting the future, the movement must be clear about its challenges, the alienation of youth, of communities, its distance from popular music, and it must recognize its strengths, its entrenchment in our schools, its didactic perfection, and its rootedness in Trinidad and Tobago's soul. Just as 60 years ago, it grew to sing the songs of this land. Now it can teach the world to sing a radically new song. All it needs is love. So, so that's what it is. I mean, we can't surrender to delusion. You know, in Trinidad, if you see a young child play the national anthem, everybody says, "Yeah, Pan is in good hands." No, the average youth is not interested. The ones
Right.
who play Pan, they play for a few years, they play in their school, and then they may play in a big band after they leave school, mainly because they paid. And they do that for a few years, but most of them, after that, they walk away and they will never set foot in a panyard again.
Right.
And that's, we can't delude ourselves that that is sustainable. You can't, I mean, part of what I mentioned in this chapter, when I was a teenager, all of us played football, for instance. You know, you played in school and you played after school. When I was at university, you know, I remember in my first year hurrying up my final end of year exams so I could go and play football. Now, none of us expected or even wanted to be professional footballers. We played out of love. And
Right.
it's that love that created the steel band movement. People who played out of love, not because they were paid, because you need, you know, if there are 1,000 people doing it out of love, there will be two who can do it professionally. But you need the 1,000. You need the
Right.
1,000 to do it out of love to support the two. You know,
Right.
you can't have the 1,000 of them being professionals. And that's what we need. We need to bring back that love. And I think it can be done if people could play their music, if they could improvise, if they could use pan how they want.
Right.
I think it's great to play, you know, in a steel band with the togetherness. But look, hey, if you into rock and your friend is an electric guitarist and electric bass guitarist and you want to play rock, more power to you. Take your pan and go and rock with them. And that's just as good as anything else. And that's what they should be taught. In other words, give it to them to do what they want. And trust them, they will do the right thing.
Yeah. There's
So
actually a guy. There's actually a guy in the States that uses pan with rock music.
yes,
So
yes.
yeah.
It's a thing called pan rocks or something. So,
Yes. Yeah.
and
That's
you,
him.
I
Yeah.
mean, you could do it with jazz, or you could do it with kaiso, or you could do it with parang, or you could do it with whatever you want. It's give them the knowledge to make the choice.
Yeah. For sure.
That's
There's a few.
that's how I think it should go.
Yeah. There's a few questions that came in.
Yeah, sure.
From Sherelle, my sister. You met her through Carrie West. Do you have any books or docudramas about the history of Calypso?
Unfortunately, no. Um, unfortunately,
Do you plan on doing anything with that, or you're gonna leave that to someone else?
with with Calypso, um,
Yeah.
I I don't plan on doing anything. When I was up until the end of last year, I was the director of the Carnival Institute, and
Right.
one of the big projects I had carded for the future was the um, the history of Carnival, which would have a section on Calypso. You know, as a series, as a show, not a one-off thing.
Okay.
Calypso, Pan, and Mass, and Carnival. I left the Carnival Institute, but they said if they're doing it, they will ask me to come and um, work on the script. So
Okay.
maybe, but right now I am working with a team, a kind of dream team really, on building a carnival museum.
Okay.
We have a building, beautiful old building in Port of Spain. We've started to raise funds. We have a design. So Calypso will be part of that.
Okay. Looking forward.
It will be great. I mean,
Nice.
we want to make a museum that will be as good as any museum anywhere in the world, you know, and with the technology and the augmented reality and the artifacts and the the research, the
Yeah.
everything, including the audiovisual components.
Oh, wow. That would be amazing. Island Gem 82 has a question. Why do you think that happens? Is it because there's not much hype as the other musical instruments?
Well, I mean, look, think of it this way. When was the last time you heard a piece of instrumental music on the top 100? Music has gone, I mean, musical tastes of young people have gone the way of vocal.
Hmm.
It has gone the way of more rhythmic than melodic. Think of how soul was replaced by, hip hop and rap,
Right.
or how reggae was replaced by dancehall, and how
Hmm.
soca replaced calypso. So, I
Hmm.
mean, these are world trends, and Pan, which is playing instrumental, very complex music at times.
Hmm.
As I say, it's swimming against the current. And if
Right.
it was just doing that, it would go the way of jazz. It would become, great musicians in the museum sort of thing. But it
Hmm.
has it has an ace up its sleeve. Pan is the best instrument for teaching music.
Hmm.
You could start someone on pan about 3 or 4 years old. It
Yeah.
doesn't mean to say they will end up on pan. Kwame Ryan, who was a conductor in Germany and a violinist, he started on pan
Oh,
when he
wow.
was about 3 or 4 years old.
Yeah. Did not know that.
So yeah, with
Huh.
Louise McIntosh Panpiper School.
Oh, wow. Huh.
So it
The
has it
more you
has an
know.
ace up its sleeve.
Yeah. Huh. So, I know there's a few bands in Trinidad that don't have the conventional um, layout for a pan. Do you think that should happen to make it more worldwide, or
Well,
like just like a piano and a guitar and all the other instruments out there? Do you think?
yeah, it will have to become standardized.
Hmm.
Um, they have not. I mean, it's a very rare person who tenor player who doesn't play a fourths and fifths tenor,
Right.
right?
Right.
So there are some pans that are pretty standardized. There
Hmm.
are some ways in which pans that have multiple drums, like four pan and so on,
Yeah.
they put in different arrangements, but there are ways it should be standardized. So you could
Hmm.
you could place it so that it's almost like if you take a tenor pan, with the cycle of fifths and
Yeah.
exploded it out,
Yeah.
so that if you could play a tenor, you could play that. So that is an obvious way to standardize, and it will happen sooner or later. And actually, it's happening in Trinidad because in the primary schools, the elementary schools, the
Hmm.
government provides pans that of a certain with a certain arrangements of notes, not just the tenors and so on. And that
Right.
is so in the schools they have standardized it so that the children, in one school could go with another or whatever. Oh, because at the junior panorama, they don't come with their own pans. There's one set of pans there and they go on that. So they have to learn on
Oh.
those, and that is moving, that's pushing it towards a standardization. So it will happen.
Hmm. I know you have this in your book already, but where do you personally think pan will be in the next 5, 10 years?
But 5 years isn't that far away, eh?
I know, I know.
Um, I don't know. I mean, I don't even know what's going to happen with international travel,
Also true.
what with COVID and so on.
Yeah.
I I'm an optimistic person. I'm hoping that the international spread of pan
Hmm.
accelerates. I mean, in the US and Canada, North America, there are, nearly 2,000 steel bands, most of which are high school and college bands.
Hmm.
You know, last week I was contacted by someone who teaches pan at Princeton and NYU. So pan
Oh,
is
wow.
pan is now Ivy League.
Yeah.
Um, so it has a glorious future ahead of it if
Mm-hmm.
it can just pluck the fruit that is hanging there.
Mm.
Um, I right now people are now beginning to accept and understand the the nature of the beautiful music Africans brought and developed in the New World,
Mm-hmm.
and accepting the fact that it is the music of the modern world. You know, you'll have the kind of conservative, backward-looking people who will still try to pretend that, um, I don't know, Mozart is a greater musician than Stevie Wonder or
Right.
Bob Marley. But the fact is that you could go anywhere in the world and they will recognize a photograph of Bob Marley.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and as people be, begin at the highest levels, now it's a very slow thing because most music in most tertiary institutions is still very, very Western, classically oriented. But
Mm-hmm.
slowly it is creeping in acknowledgement that the music of the Black diaspora is
Yeah.
as great as any music. And what's more important, it is the music of today. And I think Pan could be a very important part of that process of accelerating that process because of what I say, Pan gives music back to people.
Right.
You know, hip hop hip hop grew because the people on the block didn't have instruments. They were making music with just a beat and their voices. And look at what it is now.
Mm-hmm. Hmm. So what do you think, or how do you, I don't even know how to question this. What do you think the bands and solo panists should do to accelerate where Pan could be,
Um,
in your opinion?
I think they should be, as I say, give the pan to the younger generation. When I say give it, I don't mean necessarily physically give it,
Mm-hmm.
um, but teach teach young people audiation. In other words, how to hear
Mm-hmm.
and discern music, you know, intervals and so on, and teach them to improvise. Once you
Mm.
can improvise, you can compose and you can arrange and you can do whatever you want. I think that's the most important thing because
Yeah.
not just they will once you give them that, they become yours for life. They will become musicians for life. You will have them. You'll generate the loyalty and love that was once there.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
and understand and appreciate the specific beauty of pan. The specific beauty of pan, it's not a solo instrument. The beauty of pan is as the steel band, it's the collectivity, it's the, the communion and the togetherness. You know, in
Mm-hmm.
Trinidad, when you go in any of the large bands, and I think you see that in some of the bands abroad, they aren't segregated in any way. You
Yeah.
know, it's white, black, Chinese, Indian, rich, poor, educated, uneducated, Muslim,
Mm-hmm.
Christian, atheist, male, female, Trinidadian, Englishman, American, Japanese. It's it's everyone, and that is the function. That has always been the function of music to bring people together,
Mm-hmm.
to break down boundaries. And Pan has always done that so beautifully. And I think we should celebrate and play on that.
Yeah.
You know, as I say, I know that if in North America, it's not like in Trinidad, so they can't have open air things the same way. But
Mm-hmm.
I always encourage people, if you have a steel band in your college, for instance, open up the practice. Let people wander
Mm.
in and wander out. Don't keep it, you know, most performing artists practice privately.
Yeah.
Steel bands let you wander in and wander out and welcome you.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody could join. And I think that's a very important part of the beauty of Pan. And it should be encouraged and facilitated. And it can only help Pan spread further and wider.
Right, right. Bree has a comment. The steel pan is a perfect educational tool, and the world is realizing that more so than Trinidad, in her opinion.
Well, maybe. I mean, we do have it in schools in Trinidad. The problem isn't the problem of pan, you know. It's the
Mm-hmm.
problem of the idea of music. We still don't value our music. I'm not talking Trinidad music. We still don't value black music and
Mm,
its principles. And we still think that if you want to teach someone music, whether it's a pianist or whatever, a
mm-hmm.
pianist or whatever, all you have to do is teach them, classical European music and standard notation, and you've made a musician of them, which is kind of absurd. So the
Mm,
problem in Trinidad isn't that pan. They don't see pan as a important thing. They are pan in hundreds of schools in Trinidad, but
mm-hmm.
when they put the pan there, how do they teach them? What do they teach them to play, and how do they teach them music?
Mm,
You could have the best teaching instrument in the world, but if you teach them something that the kids hate,
yeah,
the instrument isn't at fault, or it's your idea of what is music. My
right.
daughter, when she was about 14, she joined Invaders for a while, and they put her to play the William Tell Overture.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how many 14-year-olds want to play the William Tell Overture. I
Yeah,
don't have no
exactly.
objection to Rossini, but she want the William Tell, and I couldn't blame her.
Yeah, yeah, that's true.
I mean,
So we're nearing. No, no,
when
go
just
ahead.
like that anecdote, when I was a child, and I was in elementary school, I wanted to play an instrument. So what they put me on now, given this is the early 60s, when Beatles and all that is big, and what
Mm.
they gave me a clarinet. Now that turned me off music for about the next 25 years. A
Oh,
clarinet,
wow.
yeah, everybody playing a guitar, or, even if you're a little funky and you want a saxophone, but a
Mm-hmm.
clarinet.
Fair enough, fair enough. Um, just a reminder, if you guys have any questions, please put them in and I'll try and get them. We're nearing the end of our interview, but we're gonna make things fun a little. What is one fun fact about you that no one knows? And make it PG.
My goodness. I do not, I'm pretty much an open book. Eh?
Yeah.
Um, I was
Could be.
fired from journalism. I was fired from the Trinidad Guardian when I was there.
What did you do?
But everyone, they were interfering with how I was editing the paper. So I told them,
Oh,
you could edit your own so and so paper. And they said, we'll get out of here.
okay. Are you and the Guardian in good terms now, or are you just whatever?
Well, the owner of the Guardian years later gave me the Answer McCall Award for Excellence, which is it's like a Caribbean Nobel. It's the highest award you could get in the Caribbean. So one way or another, I got back at them.
Yeah. That's funny. It's funny. Well, look at you now. Like Sherelle
Okay,
said.
let me add another. I'm pretty open book, but what might be a fun fact? My first job after I left university, I did a degree in law, by the way, and I dropped out of law school. And
Uh-huh.
I started doing a master's in sociology, and I dropped out of that, and I was really knocking around for a job. My
Hmm.
first job was to write a report of illegal Haitian migrants in Guadeloupe. And I only got that job because I lied and told them I could speak French. I didn't have a word
That
of French.
that's hilarious. Did you get caught or did you write
No,
that
no,
article? No?
I didn't just write the report. They liked the report, and I wrote some of it in French just for spite. And
Oh,
they liked it so much that they sent me to Suriname after to write on illegal Guyanese in Suriname.
wow. Huh. So you're a jack of all trades. There's a question that came in from Island Gem. What has been the best set you've played, and where and when was that? Have you ever played Pan?
It wouldn't be on pan because very soon after I started with Meritones and Lego Martin,
Uh-huh.
my older daughter was born and I had to take care of her on Saturdays and Sundays. So
Mm-hmm.
thus ended my pan career after a few tunes. So sets, no.
No.
The sets I played have been with other instruments and other kinds of bands. I mean, for my 50th birthday, a blues band that
Mm-hmm.
I knew the members of, they had me perform a song I'd written,
Oh,
which was
wow.
is still a kind of laughing point in my extended family.
Well, if
A
there's a
line,
video of that, we want to see it.
no, a line from it. It was she clawed me like a cat.
That's hilarious. That is so funny. Wow. Would you play Pan again if you had the opportunity?
I doubt it,
Okay.
because precisely what's good about Pan is what is not very much in accord with my personality. Pan is a collective thing. I really think it's a
Hmm.
collective thing. And as a writer, I become more and more solitary and more sort of antisocial. I sit down and read and write.
Fair enough.
Um, I mean, every carnival you'll see me in the pan yards,
Hmm.
literally almost every night. Especially
Right.
as where I live is very close to phase two.
Okay.
But but um, I just don't. Pan is a young person's game. Those late hours.
Right. Okay. Good to know. Does anyone else have any more questions before we let him go and enjoy the rest of his night? Because I know it's late there.
Is it? I
Well,
think
I
it's very
mean,
late.
it's what, almost nine? It's nine?
But you must have some. Come on, Daniel.
I'm thinking. What has been, out of all the interviews you've done, what has the what has been the best interview and the most informational for you?
Oh gosh, of all the interviews I've done,
Yeah.
it depends because the interviews have been on different topics. I mean, one
Mm-hmm.
I remember very clearly, and I don't know if it's because the interview itself was the best or
Mm-hmm.
just it was such unusual circumstances. But when Pan or Music Odyssey was going to be screened in the US on PBS on Afropop,
Mm-hmm.
I was interviewed. They flew me up there, and I was in the office of YouTube in New York, which is
Okay.
quite amazing. You know, it's just like and there are places with just food and people lounging around and so on. You know, this kind of high tech,
Yeah,
sort
yeah.
of slightly bratish thing. So that was quite
Yeah.
unusual, and that interview went very well because
Mm-hmm.
um, I just finished. Well, I worked on the film. It had taken a lot of focus on me, and I enjoyed talking about it. And
Mm-hmm.
that was really the first interview, at least audiovisual interview, as opposed to a journalistic interview. So that's quite memorable. But I mean, I also remember when you and I spoke after, again, maybe screening of the film. I
Mm-hmm.
remember I had a lot of fun. We could have gone on much longer chatting.
Yeah. Bree has a question. In your book, did you go into entail regarding the younger builders and tuners in TNT? I'm presently doing my thesis on manufacturing industry, and I would love to read your book if that's applicable.
Mainly, okay, the main young tuner I looked at was Augustus.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Augustus. Malika, what's Augustus' last name again?
Peters.
Peters.
Peters, yeah.
Yeah. Um, because he is the sort of success story of the Panin schools and the various programs.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I mainly looked at him. What what the book does look at is the older tuners, including some that are not very well known, like Alan Jervis. and whose impact was tremendous. But he died young. And I look at the aspects of tuning that a lot of people, including a lot of pianists, don't know. And the technical aspects of tuning. And if I, you have time? I mean, or
Yeah,
you,
yeah, we got time. Yeah, we got time.
okay. All right. Well, let me sort of explain it like this. Um, when you hear a note on an instrument, if you take any instrument, take a guitar or piano or clarinet or whatever, and you hear the note, you hear a C, you actually hear several other notes simultaneous with it. And those are
Right.
called, technically, they call harmonic overtones. It's, you'd hear an octave above, you'd hear a fifth above, sometimes you'd hear a third above. And depending on which harmonic overtones you hear and their brightness, that gives you the timbre of the instrument. So you could say, that's a guitar. That's a clarinet. Even though it's
Right.
playing the same C, right?
Right.
Now, when you get that note on the instrument, whether it's by, say, tightening the string on the guitar or punching the hole on the flute or however you get it, you automatically get all of the characteristic overtones of that instrument. Every instrument except pan.
Right.
When you're tuning a pan, you're pounding the area that's of the note. You're pounding it to get the C, and then you have to pound a different part to get, the higher the register C, and you pound it to get another. And you have to actually tune the individual overtones into the note. But but you are tuning it by pounding.
Right.
So as you pound in this one, you pound out that one. And as you pound in this one, you pound out the other one. So
Yeah.
how do they do it? I mean, it's a kind of balancing act. So this one would be a bit flat, and that one would be a bit sharp, and this one would be even more flat. So when you touch that one, they all fall into place.
Hmm.
Now, when they discovered that, that was before they were using strobes. In other words,
Right.
they could hear a note and in their mind distinguish between the different um, overtones, which was and that's why it took so long to learn to tune. Now that was that was first invented by Anthony Williams, who invented the fourths and fifths arrangement of notes, and that's why he put every note surrounded by fifths, and
Right.
on the inner ring an octave, because they harmonize. And he was the first one to discover that you could put the octave in the note itself. But Bertie Marshall, he's the one took it further. And interestingly, and this is in the book, interestingly, because he used to play a harmonica, which, as you know, is very rich in harmonics. And that's what he
Yeah.
wanted to get. He wanted to get notes. So that's the modern pans. You know how old pans sounds kind of fuzzy because there's a lot of noise. And the modern ringing sound, that's they get that by putting in the overtones. So that's a fun fact about tuning.
Yeah. I guess this is actually here. He agrees with you. There's a question here from Sherelle. Can you speak a little about Repercussions Pan or African Odyssey? Is that out for public viewing?
Um, I I don't think so. I mean, I wrote it and
Mm-hmm.
co-edited it and so on. But I didn't produce it. The producer is the person who, in a sense, owns it.
Right.
It was about a person in Nigeria who first heard Pan as a child at Festac, which was what, 1978, when
Mm-hmm.
All Stars went there to play. And what happened, and it still happens sometimes today, a steel band would go somewhere, play, and leave pans there,
Yeah.
especially bass pans.
Mm-hmm.
And the Nigerian army took those pans, and this kid, when he grew older, he joined the army and he encountered the pans again and decided, good, now I could really do this thing.
Mm-hmm.
But by then they were kind of old and out of tune. So he tried to tune some and he just couldn't. He
Right.
tried to form little bands with pans he tuned, so he decided he'd come to Trinidad to learn. So I told
Right.
his story. I went to Nigeria and then came to Trinidad with him and went around to pan yards. So it was about that and about his dream for spreading pan to Africa. But it's also a dream about, in a sense, the drum, which
Mm-hmm.
came to the New World, and in this case was going back as a pan.
Mm-hmm.
And the phrase I use is the middle passage tore some of the living flesh out of Africa. And the drum and the pan is beginning to suture those wounds. I suppose it's really
Wow.
the music.
Yeah. Huh. Bree has a question. Alan Gervais was from South. Do you know his year of birth? She would love to chat with you about her research.
Offhand, I don't. I'd have to see. I mean, offhand, I don't know his year of birth. But there are people who might, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but by the time I came to learn about him and to write about him, he was dead.
Right.
Um, but she could inbox me at Facebook and we could take it from there, by the way.
Okay. So you got that, Bree? Connection. Is there any more questions? Because I can't think of anything right now. Do you have a favorite book that you've written?
Actually, the most recent, well, usually it's the most recent one.
Recent one?
Well,
Okay.
my favorite book is the one I'm writing now, which
Okay.
isn't completed. It's not near completion.
So by the end of the year, we'll see it?
I doubt it. I mean, I've been sort
Okay.
of messing around with it for many, many years, and it's really a very, very ambitious book.
Oh, okay.
It's and it's not about pan, and it's about
Well, I think we lost them for a bit.
encapsulates some of what it's about. I mean, it
Mm-hmm.
embraces. It's about popular music, which is mainly the music that was developed by the black diaspora in the
Mm-hmm.
New World. And when I say the New World, North and South America and the Caribbean,
Mm-hmm.
in as it took over the rest of the world. You know, the point it's really a very broad-based book here because at the beginnings deals with issues of the evolution of language and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But in a sense, a point which it makes towards the conclusion is that um, this music, it is what allowed the, the Africans to survive the Middle Passage and
Mm-hmm.
enslavement. And survival is not just a physical matter of bodily survival, like, I'm alive, but equally importantly is psychic survival. And
Mm-hmm.
I talk about psychic survival as retaining the ability to laugh and to love. That is the survival. And the interesting thing about it, and I wrote some of that in my blog recently, is that it healed by pleasure. It's not a medicine that tastes bad. It's a medicine that tastes. So when you're sad and you have the blues, the blues is about heartbreak, but it's pleasure. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and that's one of the reasons why it's taken over all of the world. Um, also because it's commercially exploited. But it is,
Right.
one of the great and beautiful and remarkable human achievements. Um,
Hmm.
this popular music that was created by us in the New World. Um, and it's about that.
Yeah. Can't wait. Bree just has a comment.
Yeah.
Her favorite book is From Tin Pan to Tasco. That's a book
That was
I
my
still have to read.
PhD. That was my PhD, so it's very academic.
Oh, okay. Well,
You
I
know
will.
how I came to do that PhD? I had no intention. I was a journalist. I didn't need a PhD. It wouldn't, you know, I was just wasn't interested.
Right.
And I went to a conference in Jamaica and I spoke about Pan.
Hmm.
And they said you should write about it. So I said, well, I'm writing a book. And they said, well, why don't you do it for a PhD? I said, well, okay, if you'll allow me to write it as I would write a book and not
Yeah.
be sort of academic jargon monger. And they said, yeah, well, we could organize that. So I was going to write it
Oh,
anyway, but
wow.
I was able to do it as a PhD.
Huh.
So that's how I got my PhD. I didn't have any interest. As a matter of fact, a very good friend of me had been nagging me, do a PhD. I said, what for? I'm a journalist. I'm not going to get any promotion or any increase.
Right.
I don't care about that.
Right. Wow. Malika has has a comment. Her favorite is the fragrance of gold.
That was my first book. And it has nothing to
Huh.
do with Pan. It's about the 17th century history of Aboriginal Trinidad, when Trinidad
Really?
was thought to be the route to El Dorado.
Wow.
You know,
So what I'm gonna have to do is literally get a list of all the books you've written and start reading. Oh my goodness, that's amazing. If no one else has any more questions, I appreciate having you on the show. I learned a lot. I, like always, it's a joy to talk to you.
I said we'd have fun.
Yes, yes, you did. And I definitely had fun. I hope you guys did too. Um, so before we go, the Illustrated Story of Pan, second edition, is out. I think Malika said the link is in the bio of Instagram. It's also on your website. I will definitely post that so people can get the book and learn more about Pan because it's definitely needed.
Great. Thanks a lot.
Of course. I hope to talk to you again. We got to keep in touch for sure.
Oh, yes. That would be
Yes.
great.
And when travel is allowed, I'm coming to visit.
We might meet midway because, gosh, I want to travel.
Okay. We'll meet in the States.
Yes. Oh, great.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, you have a great night. Good talking to you again.
We must do it again.
Of course. And I want to thank all the viewers for watching. Make sure you get the book. I feel like it's gonna be a great book. And next week we have another open discussion. So make sure you tune in and we'll see you guys next week. Happy Internationals Day and have a good night. Bye.